Welcome to the PortlyAI Human Capital Squad Talk, where we engage in conversation about the changing business landscape and how human capital and other C-suite leaders are approaching this. I am Susan Ganz, and I am your host, as well as an advisor for PortlyAI. In addition, I have my own consulting firm focused on business strategy and chief of staff work. Today, I am so excited to have a conversation with Larry Stybel. A bit about Larry. He has been a career and leadership coach for chief human resources officers for more than 40 years. He is the co-founder of two companies, an entrepreneur in residence at a private equity firm, and a regular contributor on leadership matters for Psychology Today. His work on leadership has appeared in California Management Review, Harvard Business Review, MIT Sloan Management Review, and the New York Times. The Wall Street Journal also did a piece about Larry's coaching. He was president of the Boston Human Resources Association and a member of the National Human Resource Association Board of Directors. He received his doctorate in organization behavior at the Harvard University Graduate School of Education. Welcome to the podcast, Larry.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
Wonderful. We're so excited to hear your perspectives. So let's get into it. So share with our audience, what are the changes and transformations that you observed in the last few years that offer opportunities for HR leaders?
I think, as you mentioned, I've been working with HR people and with organizations for over 40 years. And so when I started, ask anybody in HR, what is your role? And they would say, attracting, retaining, and motivating employees. Got it. And now with AI, what I am seeing is a major shift that only a few HR leaders are beginning to grasp. And that is, your job is to focus on institutional trust, perceived institutional trust within the organization. Let me explain what I mean. As AI becomes more used throughout corporations and throughout society, one of the consequences is going to be the reduction of the value of analytical thinking. I don't have to do all this research. I can have AI do this for me. A second issue is the perceived increase in mistrust. I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican. You got to admit, people don't mistrust their leaders, whether they're government leaders, business leaders. Trust is a problem. And this is 2026. Imagine what's going to happen in 2030 when as AI gets used. Already we're reached a point where, can you believe what you see? Is a picture really worth 1,000 words? I don't think so anymore. Can you believe what you read? I don't think so. Can you believe what you're told? Is this you, or is this an AI bot I'm talking to? Is this you, or were you coached by AI? Mistrust is simply going to increase. So trust is going to be the key differentiating factor, not analytical thinking. It won't even be products, because you can make a great product, so can other companies. It's going to be trust. And there are going to be two caretakers about trust. Marketing and sales will be in charge of perceived institutional trust by customers, and HR will be perceived as the caretaker for institutional trust by the internal audience, which includes employees, which includes consultants, 1099 workers, and don't forget, many of your employees are also shareholders. So to me, that's an important role that HR is going to assume, and they're barely ready to handle trust as an issue.
So, my follow-up question to that is how do you coach HR leaders then, as well as marketing leaders, to instill that trust, but particularly internal trust?
I think the first thing is to measure trust. Um, Bain Capital came out with a research article that I can send to you if anybody
Yeah.
just sends me an email about how they measure trust in public companies. We have created a way to measure perceived institutional trust for privately held companies and nonprofits. So the first thing is to use AI to measure perceived trust and get a score for it. You can actually get a score for perceived trust. So you have a number to work at. In 2026, 36% of the population seems to trust us. Um, our goal for 2027 is 40% to trust us.
That's moving the needle, but it seems slow.
Yep. But the first is to measure consistently and measure it often.
And then beyond the measurement, it's what you do with that data. So then do you dig into the areas that the data is revealing where there's less trust on the spectrum? How
Again,
does
I can't generalize because it really depends on what the data says. But the idea is for HR to take this on as a major value proposition for HR, because then it catapults HR into a strategic role as opposed to a administrative role. And again, one of the things that I'm seeing and I've seen increasingly over the years is HR would like to have a seat at the table. HR would like to be perceived as a thought partner, a business advisor, but is often perceived as an administrative tool, very similar to controllers and legal people. And the times we like the best is when we don't hear from them, take them for granted.
Yeah, so let's talk further about this CHRO journey that you're talking about, um, where you are going to give some guidance with respect to managing these
Yep.
changes. And is it this point to share with our audience what one of your CEOs said from your research?
No, I was just wait a second, and we'll
Okay.
get to. I
Okay.
think one of the things we did a few years ago was we did a research project. We we surveyed a random group of CEOs around the country, and we asked one question. My CHRO is a valued business advisor on a scale of 0 to 10. 0 is never, 10 is always. We looked at CEOs who said 8 or higher. And then we interviewed the CHROs to these CEOs
Yes.
about what is their qualities, what's the qualities of the CEOs. And we published our findings in Psychology Today, and we call it The Journey. Again, I'm going to summarize the research, but if anybody wants a copy of it, just email me. I'll be glad to send you a copy. But the number one issue is openness to new ideas on the part of the CEO and the
Uh,
CHRO. And again, this would be a good place for the first slide. And that is what we find is if you're
hold
a
on a second.
CHRO and you're reporting to a CEO who's relatively set in his or her ways and not open to new ideas, you ain't going to go on this journey. Forget about it. Don't even try. Don't frustrate yourself. But if you are um, working with a CEO who's open to new ideas, for example, like this one, I keep telling my team, I expect every member to understand every function in our business. My CHRO was anxious to learn more and more about what was going on in the company, not just HR. He liked that, and that helped increase the CHRO's credibility. So, is how open is the CEO to new ideas? And how open are you to new ideas? Be honest with yourself. If that's number one. How open to new ideas? And now, just as an aside, we also do recruiting. And as part of the recruiting process, obviously, we check references. And the most important question that we ask is, how open is this candidate to new ideas from a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being never, 10 being always? And we will talk to former bosses, peers, ask the same question. Typically, when we get scores of 8, 9, 8 or higher, that means, yeah, they're very open to new ideas. That's great. 7 is, yeah, sometimes yes, sometimes no. 6 and below is no, and they're being diplomatic about it. But if you ask that same question to a number of people and you get the same number over and over again, that gives you an important clue. Openness to new ideas. The
Yes.
second important thing that you can do to make the journey from being head of a HR function to being a valued business advisor to the CEO is if there's a new CEO, somebody recently hired, recently promoted into the role, understand that boards of directors hire CEOs, and guess what? They fire the CEOs. And heads of HR are often involved on the compensation committee, so they have a personal relationship with many board members. They understand the dynamics that are going on at the board better than the newly hired CEO. So this is a perfect time to align yourself with a new CEO and say, I know some of these people on the board. I've been working with them. Let me be a coach for you on how to manage your new board. That's a great way to establish trust and for the CEO to see you not just ahead of an HR function, but as a personal advisor that can help the CEO move forward.
Absolutely.
Number 3, how close is your office to the CEOs? We got in, thanks to COVID, we got into this thing about virtual offices. Guess what? No. If you want to make the journey to being a CEO's valued business advisor, you want to be as physically close to the CEO's office as possible. I'm going to give you an example from a client of mine. The CHRO is on the second floor. The whole HR department is on the second floor. The CEO and the CFO are on the ninth floor.
Mm.
What's the probability that the CEO is going to leave the office and looking for somebody to bounce ideas off, going to press the button and go to the second floor? No.
Not happening.
If your office is close to the CEOs and the CEO comes out of the office looking for someone to bounce ideas off, CEO is going to go into your office and say, let me bounce a couple of ideas off you. That's the way to establish a bond. And again, if you're doing this virtually, forget about it. You want to be physically close. Now, what that may mean, and again, this is what I'm advising my client is, okay, the HR function is on the second floor. Great. I still want you to have a presence on the ninth floor. Even if it's going into the conference room when it's vacant, but physically be there, not on the second floor. Be part of the executive suite. So
Absolutely makes sense.
that's number three. The next number four, emphasize your non-HR experience. Um, I was a server and I waited in a restaurant while I was going to college. That is as non-HR-ish as possible. But I learned so much about customer relationships. I learned so much about how to establish rapport. I learned so much about the dynamics of what goes on in the kitchen and the power structure. So that when I'm using examples, I don't use HR examples. I use examples from the restaurant. People can relate to that because they've been in restaurants more
Yes,
than HR. And let me tell you about what's going on in the HR world. They sincerely don't care. So emphasize your non-HR business experience. Number five, deliberately, consciously blur boundaries. So in the slide that you presented, the CEO says, "I want my HR person sitting in non-HR meetings. I want that HR person to want to learn about other functions." One of the things that I do with my clients is when the financials come out and they're released, make sure you ask a question about something that has nothing to do with HR.
absolutely.
Again, it begins to blur boundaries. What you want to do is to get rid of the stereotype that you're just an HR person. No, you're a business person who happens to be running the HR function. And asking non-HR related questions about the financials helps blur the boundaries. That's five.
Yes,
Um,
before you get to the last one, I just want to make a comment there because I'm somebody who has more of a business background than an HR background. And when I was a CHRO, I would want to know about, you know, what does the sales team do? What's the vocabulary? What um what interests the client? When do they get excited? And then on the finance side, I wanted to know, I come from a background where I started my career as a commercial lender. So
exactly.
I'd want to know, how does the cash flow work? Right. So I know your P&L and I know the balance sheet, but really, where's the cash get generated? And if our PE company, because we were PE owned at the time, is focused on EBITDA, how do we get there? Right. And how do we increase the value, and what are the levers and the drivers of that? So you're preaching to the choir on this end with respect to blurring those boundaries. Super important.
And I'm finding that too many HR people perceive themselves as HR people. And no, that's not going to take your career anyplace other than HR. The idea is you're a business person who happens to be running the HR function. And that's a very different issue. And
Yes.
what you're pointing out is exactly. And the important thing is you got to be curious about the business.
Yes.
You want to learn about the business. Um, Michael Dell, who founded Dell Corporation,
Yes. Yes.
had this tradition that half a day every year, Michael Dell, founder of Dell, would go down into customer service, put on a headphone, and be the customer service rep and be in that. Now, he doesn't need to do that, but what he's trying to symbolize is customer, because managing the customer experience is what Dell is about. And it's so important. I am doing it. Um, the last technique that I recommend is called wearing my hat. What I find with HR, and I don't think this is exclusive to HR, is people tend to view problems through their functional perspectives and then
Yes.
react to problems in their functional perspectives. And the colloquialism is stay in your lane.
Yes.
Well, that's exactly what you should not be doing if you want to be perceived as a CEO's valued business advisor. So
Yes.
we have a tool, we have a technique we call wearing my hat. And that is, let's say you're at a meeting with the CEO and other functional heads, and they're talking about X, Y, and Z. You can say, well, if I put on my HR hat, I would have to say A, B, and C to this idea. If I take that off and put on my uh, business hat or my shareholder value hat, I would say one, two, three. And the wearing my hat technique allows you to say two contradictory things because sometimes it is contradictory. Guess what? It doesn't have to be the same. But if you just stay in your lane, you're not going to be perceived as a valued business advisor. If you know how to get out of your lane, CEO is going to look at you differently. So now we can put on the summary and conclusion slide,
Yes.
and that sort of summarizes what we've just been talking about, which is number one is be open to new ideas. Number two is your CEO open to new ideas? Because if your CEO is not, don't take this journey. Number two, if there's a new CEO, newly hired or newly promoted, take the opportunity to say, I want to help you manage your board of directors. I've been involved with the compensation committee. I know many of the board members. Let me help you. Three, where is your office located? If your office is located on a different floor than where the CEO is, that's not a good sign. If there is no office available, find out when the conference room is available and park yourself there. But don't sit where on the same floor where all the other HR people are. That since reinforces you as head of HR, not a business advisor. Part of the reason for physical proximity is sometimes CEOs want to bounce ideas off people, and the CEO is just going to go to who's next door. Three, talk about your non-HR experience. I gave the example of my experience in a restaurant. Susan gave an example of her experience in lending. That's important. Next is blur boundaries by asking non-HR questions about the finances. Go visit manufacturing. Don't just walk around, just find out how things are made. Talk to people. And then finally, use the wearing my hat technique that when you're presented with an idea, it's okay to react as the head of HR, fine, but then take your hat off and then react as a shareholder of the company, react as from a strategic point of view. It's okay to do that, and that will help you get the respect of your CEO. If anybody would like a copy of these slides or a copy of the research we did, just send me an email. I'll be glad to do that. You can also reach me on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for sharing the CHRO journey with us. And we'll summarize again about how to reach you at the end. But before we go, a couple of last questions. What is something, Larry, besides the fact that you were working in a restaurant early on in your career,
Yep.
what is something that we might be surprised to learn about you?
Uh, my I'm a child of immigrants. My mother were immigrants from Germany. My father was a cab driver in New York City, and my mother was worked in a garment manufacturing um, operation in New York City. My father and my mother were, America saved their lives, got them out of Nazi Germany. My father was pro-American. My father was pro-American science. It was science that ended the war. America is a wonderful country. The science is the best. And when I was in the sixth grade, which would probably make me 11, I was in the New York City public schools, and the teacher passed out an exam, didn't tell us what it was, said, just do the best you can. Of course, being 11 years old, okay, fine. I did it. I didn't understand what I was doing, and I didn't know what I was doing until later I realized it was an IQ test. And the New York City public school system in those days had a tracking system. So I was in the sixth grade. Next year, I was in the seventh grade. Well, if you were in 7-1, you were the number one. If you were in
Got it.
7-2, you're not as good as 7-1, but you're better than 7-3. I was in 7-14 out of 16 classes.
Ah,
Now, for me, it meant nothing. It was, okay, I'm in 7-14. For my father, he understood exactly what that meant. It meant that American science in the form of psychology is telling me that my son is stupid, or to be more polite, dull, normal IQ. He was very disappointed. I'm the only child. I was the depository of his hopes and ambitions, and I was a dread disappointment. And so I grew up in 7-14, feeling I was 7-14, and treated by my father as a failure. You screwed this up again. You can't do anything right, blah, 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 blah. It was only in my second year in high school that I turned in some sort of report to my English teacher, and she asked me to stay after class, and she said, you don't belong in this class. You belong in, honors English. I'm going to push for you to be in honors English. Oh, okay. And she got me into honors English. And she was the first person to believe in me. By the time I graduated from high school, I was editor-in-chief of the newspaper. I got
fantastic.
I got into college. Fast forward, I got a doctorate in, guess what? Psychology
Psychology.
from, guess where? Harvard
Harvard.
University. And my father was in the audience. And what did I become? I can become a psychologist. And what did I do? In 1979, I started a company called Stybel Peabody Associates. What do we do? We're an executive outplacement firm. We work with executives who've been told by their bosses, you're a loser. We are hired to turn losers into winners. So the experience that I had in the fifth grade of being called dull normal continued to inform my professional life and to drive me. I would have to say, um, I also, there's a thing called the imposter syndrome. Even though what saved me was that English teacher in the second
Yes.
in high school, I still felt I was an imposter, that I was fooling people into thinking
Oh,
I was smart, and that uh, I really wasn't smart. I was just a very good actor. And I continued to think of myself as an imposter until my daughter graduated with an MBA from Stanford University. And I went to her graduation and I said, you know, it's quite possible I could have fooled the admissions people at Harvard, but there's no way that I could. I had nothing to do with my daughter getting into Stanford. That has nothing to do with me. So there must be something positive there. So it wasn't. So it was only until I went to my daughter's graduation that I began to say, maybe I'm not an imposter.
Wow, Larry. First of all, thank you so much for very vulnerably sharing about your background. That's a mark of your leadership. Um, and I'm glad that you don't think of yourself anymore as falling into imposter syndrome, because you do have so many gifts to share in the world. And kudos to that English teacher for recognizing that. I also was labeled in kindergarten as being less than because I didn't carry my scissors right. And when my mother was asking the kindergarten teacher about me and what did she see, it's like, yeah, she's nothing special. Well, P.S. I wound up being the valedictorian of my high school. And I got a note from my kindergarten teacher. Oh, I always knew. And I'm like, really? Because that was news to me.
Great. Yeah, everybody, so many people have stories like that.
So thank you so much for sharing. So before we close out, what would you like our audience to remember about our conversation today? And there are so many things to remember, but from your perspective, what would you like to remember?
Well, I think I think the first thing is your role as HR has now changed. And it used to be attract, retain, and motivate the best employees. Now it's attract and retain the best employees and 1099s and manage how our institution is perceived internally by employees and 1099s. And also to be work in partnership with sales and marketing, because their mission is now to manage the how the how trustworthy our institution is perceived by customers and potential customers. And my point is that with AI, the management of perceived trust becomes the key differentiation. And in the future, analytical thinking and even, hey, I can make a great mobile device. Guess what? In 15 years, lots of companies will be able to make great mobile devices. The technology will become commoditized. It's trust that's going to be the rare thing. HR has an opportunity to be a custodian and a deliberator of perceived trust. They have to take on this role. Second is some of you may want to make the journey from being perceived as the head of an HR function to also being perceived as a valued business advisor to your CEO. It doesn't come with it. It doesn't come natural. You have to work at it. And we say it's a journey, and we've defined the journey.
Absolutely. And so what I also took away with respect to the trust and how to move forward on that is about measuring the trust and then taking actions based on what you learn from the data. And with respect to the CHRO journey, um, that openness to new ideas and not staying in your lane, which is, as you point out, not natural, to really consider wearing different hats, whether you're in the room with other C suite advisors even when you're out of the room and putting on the different hats, when you're coming up with strategy and executing on strategy, because that's how you become a true business advisor. So thank you so much, Larry, for your time, for your insights, for your vulnerability. So appreciate it. And so to find Larry, he can be found on LinkedIn under Larry Stybel,
Stop.
Stybel, Stybel, um, Stybel. Also, you can look at his websites for his companies, Stybel Peabody or Board Options, and his email address is lstybel, LSTYBEL at Stybel Peabody, PEABODY.com. To find out more information about today's podcast and Portly AI, please visit portly.ai. And in the squad spirit, keep growing and evolving and leading the way.